Neil, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I am making it. It's another very hot summer day in South Louisiana, but I'm very excited to be talking to you. I've been a longtime fan of Talking Scared, so it's a little surreal getting to talk to you, and not in person, but via camera.
It, it always makes me laugh when people say that because that's how I feel when I speak to every guest I ever have, right? I like yeah, I find it strange that some people think of me in the way that I think of other people that I like online or in books. But I mean, it's fun to hear that, but it always seems quite strange.
Yeah, I can imagine that feeling, and like I think I started listening to your podcast about a year ago. I think the first episode that I listened to was the Mike Flanagan episode. That one really, I really enjoyed that one. So I can understand why you would feel a little surreal. But to kind of
Mhm.
introduce you, for anybody who doesn't know you, you're the host of the podcast called Talking Scared. You also write as well. Are you freelance?
Yeah, I'm free. Yeah, yeah. Freelance is a grand word for what I do.
Yeah.
I basically I'm just chaotically unemployed. Um, but yeah, I'm
Well,
freelance. Yeah.
I do catch you on Esquire quite a bit, so
Mhm.
I didn't know if that was your main outlet, but at any
No,
rate, you
that's dried up this year. Weirdly, I think that either
ah
I've done something wrong or the budget has shrunk. But I'm getting way less acceptances from Esquire. But I now write for like Vulture. I write
yeah.
for Elle magazine. Sometimes I write for the Guardian in the UK. Yeah, but Esquire was like the big thing last year, and
Yeah.
I compile the best of the year horror list. Sorry, I talk my hands quite a lot. Um, I compile the best of the year horror list for them. So that's my main sort of like writerly output, I suppose.
Yeah. I love those best of lists. And then also, you were creatively writing, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I started the podcast because I quit my job in the pandemic to try and write a novel.
Hmm.
And then I did what happened is this: I wrote half a novel and didn't finish it, and I started a different novel and wrote half of that and didn't finish it. So I have a full novel in length, but they're not the same book. And all along, I had this podcast as a way to just give me a little week by week hit of success and dopamine and a job completed. Otherwise, I thought I'd go crazy. And then it's kind of become a tiger that I've got by the tail. And now it has consumed all of my life, and I have no time to write. But I have signed a contract for a novella that is coming out in 2025. So it'll be out there. It's going to be called Good Boy. It's out there for people to read. It's part of Wild Hunt Books' Weird North sort of series of
Hmm.
Northern English writers writing about the weird north of England, and it is a weird place. The caveat to this is I have 25 days left to write said novella, and like 9 books to read for the podcast, and like 4 episodes to record, and a day job to do, and a lot of stuff. So yeah, I'm a writer, but as I mentioned,
Yeah.
unemployed.
You're a very, very busy man, and how you juggle it all, really, I don't know,
Yeah.
but you have all of my respect. So I just wanted to talk to you today a little bit about your interview work that you do for the podcast, kind of your relationship with reading. I know that you have a unique take on the academic side of reading because you have studied Gothic fiction, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that it's an interesting point to talk about, like how your reading has changed throughout your life, from reading for fun to the academic side of it to reading for the podcast, those kinds of things. And then you and I share a thing where we can't read about animals dying on the page and empathy and horror. So I would love to touch on that at the end of our chat as well. But to get started, do you want to talk a little bit about your relationship with reading and how that's evolved over your lifetime?
Well, thankfully, I like it, which helps with the podcast. Yeah, I mean, you know what? It's actually a good question. It's something I think about a lot. Um, and it's more than just reading, but reading's the main manifestation of it. I'm one of those people, a lot of people tell me I'm ADHD. Now, whether I am or not, I don't. I just know that I don't have a great concentration span. But I've always been able to just lose myself in a book or a movie. I can like just lose myself in it in a way that I've realized other people can't. And this is a really like all over the place meandering answer, but
Oh no, I love it.
my wife is completely different to me. She likes to read and but she's somebody who's into facts and non-fiction and science. And she's an engineer. She's trained to be an engineer. I'm very proud of her. because she's quit like a really high flying job to train as an engineer to build airplanes. It's really cool. But she's fascinated by all these things, and she tries to talk to me about it. And I'm interested in her life, but the actual things, I almost can't listen to them because they don't interest me. And I've realized that I can only be interested in something if it has a story attached to it. And that could be the news, that could be history, that could be someone's experience, but there's a story there. But if there's not a narrative, if it's just data of plot or outline or narrative, I don't care. And I've realized the only thing I care about in life, the only thing that moves me is story in all of its forms. And it just so happens that books are my favorite form of story. So that's a really grandiose answer to a really simple question, but that's my relationship to reading. That it literally is the reason I think my life is worth living. Story, nothing else matters.
Yeah, no, well, it's an interesting answer because, like you mentioned, like the people in my life also think very linearly. And
Mm-hmm.
like my boyfriend works in coding and program development, and my mom was a math teacher. And so I feel like the oddball out here whenever I
Mm-hmm.
do appreciate story and things like that. And for me, like the books that hit the hardest are the ones that are particularly character driven. And it's
Yeah.
like that strong sense of empathy that you kind of establish in the book. And I'm also somebody who loses myself in books. So I relate to that answer a lot. But I do know whenever you read in different parts of your life for different reasons, things change. So I was curious if, like, for instance, so I read a lot of advanced copies for the reviews that I do. And so sometimes a deadline comes up where I need to read something to review it, and like my mood necessarily isn't in the headspace for that book. Has that ever happened to you to where, like you're in the mood to read a particular kind of story that moves you, like you said, and like
Mm-hmm.
what you need to read is not necessarily that same kind of story?
Yes. So to explain for your viewers, I do a podcast every week where I interview the author of a book X. And I said early on that I would never not read the book because
Hmm.
what's the point, right?
Right.
What is the point? I'm not making any money on the podcast. So if I'm not going to enjoy it, why am I doing it? So
Right.
I have to read the book. And if I'm honest with you, I probably only enjoy to the point where I would say I'm glad I read this book regardless. I probably enjoy a third of the books I read to that extent. Now, I'm not going to say which books they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's quite obvious on the podcast the ones I really gel with, to be honest.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's where the academic stuff comes in helpful because I spent a lot of years reading books that I don't necessarily want to read beyond
Yeah.
just having read them. Um, what I do find is that quite often I'll read a book and not love it, and then
Hmm.
have a conversation with the author and have a lot more respect for it because I get why they did that thing that I didn't understand, or suddenly that thing makes sense, or that thing means something. And but that's a very privileged position to be in because most people don't get to talk to the author every week about the book they've just read. So to answer your question, yeah, there's loads of times I just want to read something else. And I'll be honest with you, I get bored of reading horror now and
Hmm.
again. I want to read sci-fi or fantasy or God forbid literary fiction, not so much. Um, but horror is such a broad church, right? Such a vastly broad church that
Yeah.
that's one of the great things that you're not really reading one genre. You're reading, all right, maybe one shelf in a shop, but it contains multitudes.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your credit, you said that it may be obvious on the podcast which ones you enjoy more than others. I honestly can't tell. You're very enthusiastic in your conversations that you have with people, and that's one of the reasons why I listen in is because you care a lot. It's very clear that you care a lot. So to your credit, kudos, or as you like to say, kudos. But
You
at
know,
any rate,
yeah.
yeah, I definitely I can relate to that there. And like you said, I like the trend that a lot of authors are including author notes at the end of books, because
Yeah.
I find it helps to kind of rephrase or recenter your perspective on that book.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I find that I've gotten a lot more out of my reading whenever things like that happen. So I
Mhm.
definitely relate to what you say as well about having those kind of conversations that reframe what you read.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, what have you been reading recently? I believe that you just got through reading Cloud in the Cornfield, correct? That trilogy?
I jumped off a call with Adam Caesar not 5 minutes ago. Yeah. Um I've planned my summer quite badly because I'm doing I've got in just a few weeks, I've got Adam and Clown in the Cornfields. It's 3 books. Then
Yeah.
I've got Keith Rosson with
Yeah.
his 2 books. Then I've got Laura Senf with her 3 Clackety
Three.
books.
Yeah.
And these are one episodes with like multiple books. So that's kind of not been planned brilliantly. Um, but yeah, Cloud in the Cornfield was great. Have you read those?
I read the first one and I have the second. I've been meaning to get to it, but I picked it. I think I listened to the audio, I want to say like 2 or 3 years ago, whenever I first started really getting into horror. And it was so much more than I was
Yeah,
expecting it to be. And I hope that
right.
that's not an offense to Adam, but it's just like, you pick it up like, oh, it's a YA slasher. You think this is going to be kind of entertainment, but there's a lot of commentary that he
Yeah,
manages to
like
put in there.
oh, you're gonna like the episode with Adam because we talk about all of that stuff. Yeah,
Good,
it's amazing.
good.
And what I'll say is the second book suffers a little bit from middle book syndrome.
Yeah.
Um, book three just like swings for all the fences. It's so funny, and I think they're probably the most pleasant surprise I've had all year in what I expected and what I got.
Yeah.
But what you want to know some other books I've enjoyed recently?
Yeah, yeah. Just I want to talk to you about books that you've been enjoying and kind of go from there. I know this is meant to be an interview, but I always enjoy
Okay,
having a conversation about books. So if that's okay with you, I'd love to
that's
do
absolutely
that.
fine. Yeah, I mean it's been a good summer. Because I had King back on the show,
Yeah,
and
it's a big one.
I did love his stories. Yeah, I loved his stories very much. And what else have I really loved? I'll tell you what, an episode that hasn't gone live yet with an author called Elena Valencia. And
Hmm.
I've been shouting this book from the rooftop. She's written it's her debut collection, and it's called Mystery Lights. And it's
Okay.
published by Tin House. So it's got the Tin House brings. But
Hmm.
every story has got something, whether it's a UFO or a ghost. And they are they're literary stories in the sense of they're about the people rather than the weird thing. But there's
That's
just something
interesting.
so compelling about them. Yeah, and they end in a literary way rather than a genre way, so they're not neatly tied up. So they feel very much like a New Yorker type story. But like just and I don't love that sort of thing, but I was just blown away by it. Really, really good stuff. Um, and then, of course, the book that has set my heart alight this year is Malamud's Incidents Around the House. I
Yeah.
just I just think I I still don't quite have the words for what that book does to me or how it does what it does. It just feels like a
Yeah.
truly unique piece of work.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I keep coming back to the ending of that book, and it
Mm,
just you kind of it's like one of those it almost feels like you're in a liminal space and you're
yeah.
like in a void in a vat of emotion, not like it's I don't know how he did it. I don't know how he planned that out and how he executed it the way that he did,
Mm,
but I have so much respect for Josh Malerman for pulling off that kind of a book because it's
mm.
just there's so much to it. Whenever you
It,
look at like family dynamics, uh, grief, loss, confrontation of intrafamily issues, like I mean, there's something for everybody in that book, and it is
yeah.
just so much.
It
Um,
made me feel the way that watching The Exorcist for the first time made me feel. Just
yeah,
like off kilter and
yeah,
like I don't really know how the world works anymore.
yeah,
And it's frightening in a kind of inarticulate, well, no, not inarticulate, but sort of sublingual level. The fear in that you can't pinpoint the sentence. It's somehow in between the words and the sum of the
hmm
words, and yeah, I just think I think it's a true masterpiece.
yeah. It's like he puts so much power in what's not said,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
something that's really, really special.
hmm
To have that much weight in those in between spaces, like you
yeah,
said. So
yeah.
yeah, that's I think American Rapture is probably gonna be my book of the year, and then Incidents will not be far behind.
So let me ask you something then.
Yes.
Um, so I want to do this in a way that isn't going to spoil things for people.
Hmm.
How did you cope with the end of American
Oh,
Rapture?
it was bad. I took pictures of it when it happened, but I was like sitting on the couch and I was like full on sobbing. And my
Mm,
boyfriend was sitting next to me and he looked over and he's like, he seen me get emotional whenever I read before, but he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Uh-uh." And then he just like he picks up the dog and he puts the dog on my lap. I'm just hugging my dog and crying for a good while. And then I got up the next morning and I immediately wrote my review for it. And I just like channeled all of the
Yeah,
admiration and emotion that I had into that review. And like I just couldn't shut up about it, really. I was very thankful that I had a couple friends who actually were reading it around the same time that I was. So I was able to talk to them about it.
yeah.
Um, but
Because
yeah.
I was very lucky in many ways that I was pre-warned because I saw
Yeah.
CJ lead at StokerCon, and
Hmm.
she gave me. I felt so smug about this. It's the only time I've ever felt like big time. She gave me the only copy at StokerCon of that book.
Oh, that's special.
Um, and then I kind of jokingly said, does this thing? And she was like, oh, it's worse than that. So I went in warned,
Hmm.
and then so when I got to it, I was like, okay. But I read the entire thing with a state of anxiety, thinking I know sort of what's coming, but can I handle it? Turns
Yeah.
out I couldn't, ruin my entire week. But I'll say this: I've read two books this year. I won't name the comparison because I don't
Hmm.
like to criticize things
Yeah.
unnecessarily. I've read two books this year that both do that,
Hmm.
and one of them felt wholly extraneous to the plot and unnecessary, and
Yeah.
actually left me feeling quite offended.
Hmm.
And American Rapture couldn't be more different. I think it's a
Yeah.
brilliant, brilliant, heartfelt, beautiful book.
Me too. And that's so like that's kind of the thing that I wanted to talk to you about whenever we read horror, there's obviously gonna be things that hit stronger than others emotionally
Mm-hmm.
because horror is every piece of I don't know what you want to call it, but it's elevated to 10. You
Yeah.
know, emotion, stakes, suspense, all of those good things. And so it's really interesting what manages to hit harder in certain books compared to others, like how authors treat it. And I think you kind of talked to Elle Nash about this, about like what kind of magic is written between a character in one book and the reader and like what you get out of it to make that
Mm-hmm.
emotional punch land. And I think it all kind of goes back to empathy. I'm not sure your thoughts on this, but like from a psychological standpoint, if I could label one thing that I think it is, I think it's that ability to put yourself in that character or that person's shoe, that being shoes
Mm-hmm.
for any amount of time and experience an iota of what they're experiencing.
Yes, I think readers give ourselves too much credit for this, right? I think we like to say, oh, we're empathetic people. It's like you don't get bonus points for having feelings. The
Right.
bonus points go to the writer who are able to somehow turn scratch marks on paper
Hmm.
into something that is a vehicle for your empathy, right? That's
Yes.
where the art is. You don't get points for like meeting them halfway. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, and I think you're right. I think it's always character, right? It's always character. Cujo. I always go to Cujo because Nat Cassidy, bastard, reminded me of the line Cujo just wanted to be a good boy. Cujo's a
Hmm.
character. He's not human, but he has an interior life.
Right.
And King manages to make you care about that dog so deeply in just a few impressionistic italicized passages. And I would go to battle to save Cujo's life. Um, you watch something. I was just talking about this to Adam Cesar. He's not called Cesar. Adam Caesar. I keep doing that. Um, you you watch a slasher, like a
Hmm.
derivative slasher, what the one we talked about was House of Wax, which
Yeah.
was marketed as, watch Paris Hilton die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a different kind of experience because you're not being asked to empathize. You're being asked to kind of stand off to one side and watch these people as props. And some books operate like that. American Psycho operates. There are no human beings in that story. There are only
Right.
props. But you read something by Phil Fracassi, and my God, like my heart is just a puddle at my feet. King does it pretty much better than anyone. I mean, have you read The Dark Tower? Are you a King junkie? Have you?
So I am, and I'm in progress, King Junkie. And now
Right.
that you've announced that you're going to do the Dark Tower read along, I was looking
Yeah.
for a reason to start it. So I'll probably start it either at the end of this year or beginning of next.
Yeah, do it with us. It'll be
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, book 7 of The Dark Tower, oh boy, you
Yeah.
need to prepare yourself now, right now,
It seems
because
like an extended character study.
I, I mean, it's basically he takes a lump hammer to your heart.
Hmm.
Um, and I've never experienced an empathetic reaction like I experienced in that book, that one
Yeah.
book. I mean, my God. But the things that get to me, I mean, I I kind of use my podcast as a bit of a kind of therapist couch sometimes, where I just talk about all the things that really freak me out, and the list is growing. I'm becoming more and
Yeah.
more susceptible. But forget my terror about possession or this stuff. The two things that I can't handle in fiction and I can't handle in life are animals suffering. Animal
Hmm.
death is okay. It's animal suffering I can't
Yes.
stand.
Hmm.
Um, and here's the one that I don't talk about so much: human loneliness.
Yeah,
Like
that's a
I
big one.
find the idea of people being truly lonely so. I think 'cause I'm a communicator,
Hmm.
and the
Yeah.
thought of people having no one to tell their thoughts to or share the load. I find that in fiction and in life just the most brutal thing to consider. So they're the
Yeah.
two things that will really tweak my empathy meter to excruciating levels.
Yeah. And I want to ask, did you read I Was a Teenage Slasher yet by Stephen
Not
Graham
yet, no,
Jones?
not yet. I've got it, but I haven't read
Okay.
it yet.
Well, that I think that you're really going to enjoy that. And I mean, you know this from the Angel of Indian Lake trilogy, but
Mhm.
what Stephen Graham Jones has managed to do for the slasher and to kind of elevate it into that empathetic approach, whenever he says, "We would have all swam out there for you, Jason." I mean,
Oh,
that's the exact thing of
yeah,
like of making you care about something maybe you didn't necessarily even consider
yeah,
before. And so I think you're really going to enjoy I Was a Teenage Slasher because that's a book that hits on that thing of being alone and then like possibly having somebody in your corner to talk to about
yeah.
things in a way that's not really expected. And I agree
Okay.
with you that that's something that in horror when done well hits extra close to home because like a lot
Yeah.
of horror is like people in old times or previous times to now I find like we're in this place of people just believe people characters now in horror. We're not wasting the first half of the book saying, "Oh, she's crazy, he's crazy, we're in denial." I mean, there's still a
Mm.
few stories like that, but I feel like we're all readily in a place of building that sense of communication, even within our fiction, of believing people and seeing where it plays out from there. I'm not sure if you feel the same way. It could just be maybe I'm having an optimistic day, but
No, that's really interesting. And I'm just thinking, sorry, this happens. I do a lot of thinking on my feet in converse. I think with my mouth or I think with my pen, right? I
oh
don't
no,
ever,
I'm the same
I
way.
sort of switch off when I'm not talking or writing. I just sort of exist
Yeah.
as a sort of haze. Um, I wonder how much that is to do. Maybe this is way over the top, but I wonder if there's any link between that and Me Too. And
Yeah.
not just Me Too, but Me Too occasion this thing where we now, the default is that we believe victims.
Yeah.
And that's no longer just you know a female um, or sexual misbehavior thing. It's all things. You believe people until maybe that's what crept into horror. Maybe we believe people more because we're all trying to be more empathetic. Maybe I don't know. It's a half formed thought, but maybe there's something in there.
Yeah, I mean, and like, there's really no way to know because like, there's so
Mm,
many right now, especially with the explosion of social media. We're all so connected, and we're like available to information at all times. We're never not fully off the grid as much as we want to be.
mhm,
Like people can pick up and call you at any moment. That was never a thing, however many years ago. So I think that it's an overwhelming sense of having all of this stuff available, but I think it in a way it has extended that ability to believe people. It's opened up that realm of possibility
mhm.
for these kind of things. And I know for me as a reader, I would much rather spend time delving into character dynamics where the plot goes than dealing with denial for so much longer.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's just a personal preference. And there's still books who do it super well. I mean, Nat Cassidy's Nestlings, the whole dynamic between Anna and Reed, that was super interesting to read, but he wrote it in a
Mhm.
way that made it so.
Well, the book's about that, right? I think if the
Exactly.
book's
Yeah.
about like someone feeling like if someone is Rosemary from Rosemary's Baby, which all these books are riffing on, then it's important that she's an island.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
like plot important. But yeah, do we need to really spend the first third of the book working out if the house is haunted, or can we just get in
Yeah.
there and see what happens with the ghosts? I agree with you.
Yeah. So that's a trend in horror that I've really really
Mhm.
enjoyed. But it may just be I might just be picking up books that or it's tailored to that preference at this point. We have a visitor, Charlie, saying hello.
Hello,
Um,
Charlie.
Yes. But at any rate, so what do you have planned coming up reading wise, podcast wise, writing wise? I know that you, like you said, you're a very busy man, so I just want to kind of talk about what's coming up for you, and this is your time. So whatever you want to mention during this point.
When does this go live?
I don't really have a firm schedule, so whenever you would like.
Okay. So well, to start with the bad news, I'm taking a fairly chunky break at the end of this year because I've done this now every week since September 2020, and I'm a deeply broken man. um, so what I'm going to do going forwards is I'm going to record. Sorry about this light, by the way, people. I don't know
Oh,
what the.
you're fine.
I'm going to do every year because I plan to do this for a while. I'm going to do January through to Halloween every
Hmm.
week,
Yeah.
and then take like November and December off, and then do like a Christmas special thing and stuff. And I've already got this year's picked. In fact, I may even announce it on this thing. But and then I'm going to come back. So I'm going to take those 2 months off just so
Yeah.
I can like read other things and refresh my
Yeah,
palette
absolutely.
and stuff like that. So that's the plan. But the rest of the summer is pretty cool. I've got a lot of like first time guests I've wanted to catch up with. People like Keith Rawson, Laird
Hmm.
Barron is coming on the
Yeah.
show. I'm getting CJ Lead on the show to talk about American Rapture. That's already recorded. It's a great conversation. I'm doing a bit of non-fiction as well.
Yeah.
Anna Bugaskaya, who's written a book called Feeding the Monster, all about horror
Yeah.
cinema. Emily Hughes has written her horror for weenies. So I'm doing a bit of non-fiction around that. And I've also introduced this off-book
Yeah. I've
strand.
enjoyed those.
Good, I'm glad because I wasn't sure. So for people who don't know, off-book is I started to get more and more invitations to speak to people who weren't primarily authors. And I always
Hmm.
want to say yes. But I
Yeah.
was like, every time I take someone who's not an author, it means one less author I can speak to. And I now feel a weird responsibility to help promote authors in whatever small way I can.
Yeah,
So
I
it
feel
felt,
that.
yeah. So it
Yeah.
felt bad not to free up space. I thought, sod it, just do an extra episode every now and again. So I've got one going live this week with Trevor Henderson, who
Hmm.
like
Yeah, yeah.
for it, if you don't follow Trevor, you should. Slimy Swamp Ghost on all social media. Um, and then I've got some big. Should I announce this? So Heart Starts Pounding. Have you heard of that podcast?
I have not.
Right. I don't. This is new to me. She's got like 1 million followers, but I didn't know about her, and other
I'm
people
gonna write
don't.
it.
She
I'm gonna write
basically
it down right now.
every week she does a little. She's called. Her name escapes me. This is really bad. I've had a tough day.
No, no, you're fine.
Kaylin Moore. That's her name. Kaylin Moore. And every week she does a half hour, 40-minute conversation about a spooky topic, whether it's like famous disasters at Disney World
Oh
or
yeah, yeah, yeah.
creepy backwoods stories or haunted houses and stuff like that. And she's got like 1 million followers and she's brilliant. And she's going to be my off book Halloween special.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome. I'm excited for
the, th-
that.
the thing that I'll say, but I don't know if I've actually concretely booked yet, is I'm in conversation with Kate Siegel to come and talk
Oh
about
crap.
because I kind of know Mike now, kinda.
Yeah.
Um, and she said she may come on, but she's very busy, and I don't want to put her on the
Yeah.
spot. So it depends if she's free. But if she is, then yeah, I can't wait to talk to her. And other things, I'm just writing my novella. I'm doing the Esquire thing. I'm doing the Dart Tower next year.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm also going to be doing in my break, I'm going to be writing for another podcast that I can't announce just yet because I haven't signed the contract, but a very big podcast in the UK that's about spooky things. I'm going to be writing episodes for them. So that's going to take up my winter. That's kind of, and amongst all, I'm also a copywriter by trade, and I write things about like toilet manufacturers or like bricklayers or power tools and stuff. So yeah, but that's less interesting for this podcast.
Oh man, you were so busy, Neil. Oh my goodness. I don't know how you do
I
it.
do sleep quite late. I mean, I'm not that.
Yeah.
I talk a good game. I have long lunches and walk my dog. It's not that hard.
I don't know. You sound pretty busy, but at any rate, I love everything that you've done, and I really enjoy, especially the way that you talk to authors and people who are involved in the horror community. It's like really opened up a door to understanding how writing is done, how creation is done. Some of my favorite conversations that I've had the luxury of listening to have been on your podcast. I love it so much, and I am so happy that you're so busy, but I hope for your sanity it's not too much. So honestly, just thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat with me today out of your super, super busy schedule. It would be remiss of me if I didn't bring up, I believe that you're a Chapel Roan fan now. Is that correct?
Right, so don't quiz me because this is brand new to
Oh
me.
no.
Okay, so don't. I'm not. Is there a kind of? Is there like a version of Swifty for Chapel Roan? Is there a group that they haven't?
I don't, Neil, I don't even know. She
Okay,
took off like overnight, and I was even late to the club. I mean, and I
yeah,
started listening to her back in like May.
yeah. I saw. Basically, I have like I'm 40 years old and I'm white and from the north of England. So if I go on Spotify, they just go, here's some indie music, you'll enjoy this, right? And I get kind of bored of it. And I kept hearing this Chapel Roan, and the name's a great name.
Yeah.
For some reason, I think because roan is like a horse kind of
Yeah,
word.
it's like
I
a
thought it
coat
was
color.
right, yeah, I wouldn't know, but I assumed it was like some kind of country thing, and I like country. So I thought, oh, I'll listen to Chapel Roan, and I put her album on, and I was just like, this is incredible. And I saw a really, really funny video just this morning. I shared on Instagram, and it's two dudes doing either a podcast or a radio show. And it just
Yeah.
said that it's just titled as Chapel Roan is doing things to white men, to white straight men, and they're going crazy. She's got something. I don't understand what's going on.
I know. It's hard to define because I'm really not a pop person. I
Yeah.
really mostly like a rock alternative kind of person, and her music is awesome. So I think it's been super funny to see you discover her. Just
Yeah.
knowing that, we're all a bunch of horror people, but we love Chapel Roan.
I mean,
So
I'll go further. Like, I am a straight dude. I'm married, right? There is no, I am not somebody who is in any way a minority or prejudiced against. Or, I cannot
yeah,
claim to be anything more than an ally, on the sidelines.
same.
But there's something about the way she sings songs. There's kind of an infectious joy about her embrace of queerdom
Yeah,
that I find genuinely emotional. I find it quite moving
me
in a way
too.
I have no right to beyond we're going back to empathy, right? Because she's not
Yeah,
speaking to me or for me. But I'm
exactly.
just like, oh my God, this young woman has like broken free of like the shackles of all the stuff that I hate. And it's just like, and she's not doing it in an angry way. And all
No.
right, it's provocative, but it's not provocative in a negative, trying to piss people. I'm sure it does, but the
Yeah.
entire thing feels like joy and celebration.
I was about to say it's a
And
complete celebration of it.
yeah,
It's a unfiltered, this is me, this is what like there's no barriers, like it's very authentic. And I think that that's
mm,
the thing that makes it so relatable is like to because we all aspire to that authenticity, right? We all
yeah,
want to be
yeah.
living truly as us without judgment and all those things, and she's doing it and she's doing it well.
And I am walking around my house just singing Pink Pony Club to the point where my wife is threatening to leave me. Honestly, it's like, yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Well, thank you so much, Neil, for your time. I want to respect your time. I know that you're a very busy man. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention before we sign off?
Well, first of all, I want to, well, yes, actually. A couple of things. One, everyone get reading from a Buick 8 because that's going to
Yeah.
be the Christmas special. Me, Nat Cassidy, Ali Malinienko are
Oh,
getting back together to
perfect.
do a deep dive into From a Buick 8, which is a kind of obscure King book, but it's the one that I talk about all the time.
Yeah.
To the point where even King knows that I'm a fan because when I mentioned it, well, he was like, yeah, I know you like that one. So I thought it's Christmas. We're going to talk about that. Okay. So everyone read From a Buick 8. Um, Second, I will come back and do this anytime when I'm less under pressure time wise. So please invite me back. It's a pleasure
Oh,
speaking to you.
absolutely. Oh,
But I do
thank you.
mean that. Please let me come back.
Absolutely.
And third, and I'm doing this entirely off the huff, but I'm in a good mood. I do this like State of the Horror Nation where I get
Yeah.
book influencers to come and talk about their year in horror.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to come and do it?
Oh my God. I would love to. That would make my year. I would absolutely
Okay.
love to.
Right. Well, I'll email you. Come on and do the I'm going to get three people together and you can be one of them because you read all the books that I read and like all the books that I like. So if anything else, it'd be a vindication of my taste. So yeah, we'll sort that out.
Oh, I'm so honored. That really means so much to me. Yeah. I'm just really so happy that, and I say this every time I talk to anybody in the horror community, I'm just so happy that I've found people that we can talk about this kind of stuff with. I've always
Hmm.
been kind of nobody else that I really know or in my family reads horror. So to have some
Hmm.
a community to talk about these kinds of things with has just meant everything. And
Well,
honestly, anytime I get an arc, I just feel so honored. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
you value me enough to be able to read this. So,
And but
uh,
enough about me, and not enough about me for a start. How did you get into this, and how long have you been doing it?
So I've only been at this for about a year. I just started interviewing people like 2 or 3 months ago. I actually interviewed Liz Karen back in January, but I seriously started interviewing a couple weeks ago. And basically, I have kind of been a fan of like sci-fi horror, not so much fantasy, all of my life. I'm kind of like a big X-Files nerd, so anything adjacent to that, I've loved to
Hmm.
read. And then I'd say in fall of 2022, I picked up Rachel Harrison's Such Sharp Teeth, and I really kind of got a taste for modern horror, and then I just couldn't stop. And then from there, I started reviewing for the website, FanFi Addict, their horror section called Fear for All, which I try to pump out 1 or 2 reviews a week, and then it just kind of took off from there.
You
Uh,
wrote a thing about Stephen King's It that was
yeah.
absolutely fantastic,
Oh,
like because
thank you
that's
so
my favorite
much.
book, as everyone knows. Like
Yeah,
that was brilliant. That's when I because I knew you followed me and we chatted a bit, but when you wrote that, I
yeah.
read that's the first time I was like, oh God, this is actually like genuinely someone who needs to be listened to.
Oh,
Um,
thank
it's
you. That means
fantastic.
so
So,
much.
but tell me, who are your like not King because King's
Yeah.
everyone's right? Who are your three most like dream guests to speak to?
So I actually did get to talk to Rachel Harrison a couple weeks ago, and that I was so nervous for that. I won't even lie, like I don't even remember that conversation. I'm gonna have to go back and edit it, and I'm gonna be like, oh, so that's what we talked about. I just admire her so much for what she's done for
Hmm.
women in horror, and like that sounds reductive because it's so much more than that, but just in general, the way that she writes women means a lot to me. It makes me feel seen and understood in a way that I
Yeah.
don't think any other author has. Um, it's hard to not say King because I'm revisiting him now and at this point in my life because I wasn't somebody who read him super young. Um, Man, CJ Lee, the way that she's writing lately, and Liz Karen, they've only put out like 2 books apiece, but I am like fans for life. I want to read all of their stuff because again,
Hmm.
the way that they write is just gorgeous and I feel so relatable in all of their stuff. And then beyond that, I talk Cloud Chapman's work, Nat Cassidy, those two. I love them dearly. I actually got to talk to Clay last week, and it was probably one of the best conversations I've ever had in my life. He's such a cool
Yeah.
person, and it's just so nice to be able to see people who create and have a platform like he has, like shared the wealth. Like he is just all about spreading the positivity and all of those things. So those are kind of the big ones. I am trying to read more indie horror. And like I love Gemma Moore. She's great. I love everything that she writes. I'm gonna blank out because you put me on the spot now, but those are kind of like the ones that come to mind.
But when you can easily talk to all of them, just send them emails because like don't you think the coolest thing about this because you and I kind of sit on the sidelines of horror.
Yeah.
Obviously the talents over there doing wonderful things with words and like I used to think of it as this completely binary like two tier or even three
Yeah.
tier or but like these people are just happy to talk
I
and
know.
like
I've had that
so
realization within like
generous.
the
Yeah.
last few weeks about it because it is a little isolated. So like I'm in South Louisiana. We don't get like a lot of book events. Like we're not, we're kind of removed from a lot of things if you catch my
Try
drift.
the north of England.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a little isolating in and of itself at that point, but then
Mm.
like being active on social media and like it took me a while to get the courage to reach out and do this kind of stuff. So it's been a little bit of a learning journey and kind of coming to understand that hey, we're all just people kind of thing, but
Yeah.
it's hard to not be nervous or whatever. I mean, I'm sure you felt the same way when you talked to Stephen King. I mean, these are people that have meant a lot to us for a lot of different things for a while.
Hmm. Yeah. Stephen Graham Jones scares me the most.
Oh, I'm afraid to talk to him because he's when I hear him talk on your podcast, he's one of those people who is like so creatively genius.
Hmm.
Like you bring stuff, I've heard you bring up stuff to him. He's like, "Oh yeah, I didn't even know I did that. That's kind of cool how that works, huh?"
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, how do you?
Imagine being so good you forget some of those ideas. I mean, because
I
King,
know.
I wasn't that nervous.
Yeah.
because I know so much about his stuff
Yeah,
that I
that's
wasn't
fair.
going to be, and I knew he wasn't going to be a dick, and I wasn't going to be kind of like on the back foot.
Hmm.
But Stephen Graham Jones is just so cool.
Oh yeah.
And I don't really get scared by cool because we're not in high school anymore. But he's cool in a way that is genuinely cool, not
Yeah.
like push with the lockers cool. And I did a Kingcast episode with him recently, where it was me,
Yeah.
Eric, and Stephen. And I just felt like the dull kid at school again. I was just like, he's so cool. So he intimidates me. And Margaret Atwood scared the life out of me because she was
Oh
just there being all Margaret Atwood.
yeah, that's
But
fair.
yeah,
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 no.
it's been
See,
a
I think
ride.
I think Stephen Graham Jones is intimidating because he's so casual about it. He's so
Yeah,
humble and he's not in your face about his knowledge and
yeah,
his craft. He's just like he's here to have a good time and he's just,
yeah,
but I
yeah,
what can I say? I'm so grateful for his writing because holy shit.
indeed.
All right,
Yeah.
Neil. Thank you again so much for your time. Everybody can mostly find you on social medias on at Talking Scared or Talking Scared Pod, I
No,
believe.
it's talk. It's a dog.
Talk
It's pain in
Scared.
my.
Yeah.
Someone has got talking scared, and I want them dead.
Yeah, that
It's
ing.
it's talk scared pod. Yeah,
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, now and whenever I post this, I'll put links to everything in
that's
the
cool.
video description notes. But thank you again, Neil, so much, and I
It's been
hope that
such a
you.
pleasure.
Oh,
Please
thank
invite me
you.
back.
Oh, literally anytime you tell me.